Audible, sir.
Thank you. Door close. Today, I am going to, before going into the concept of Plato's theory of education, I wanted to discuss about the so-called, the last aspect of justice of Plato, and that is called justice is an architectonic principle. I have been using this term from a long time. Architectonic. I am using this term, architectonic. Now, what exactly you mean to say architectonic or architectonic principle? Now, in short, to understand in a very short description, whenever you are making some uh, architecture, whenever you are making some architecture, this is Meenakshi temple, right? Whenever you are making some architecture, the sculptors who are involved in making the so-called architecture will have a vast craftsmanship, craftsmanship which means they will be very well versed in their art. They have high experience. They have not only high experience, they have a lot of crafts skills. They have a lot of crafts skills as such. Under this scenario, under this scenario, under this scenario, consider this: when they have high experience and high skill set, in order to make some architecture, in order to make some architecture, there will be one prototype for this architecture. Prototype means I want this Meenakshi temple to be constructed in this way, with this shape, with this design. I want these individual things to be present at each and every place. They will be having a different requirement. And who will be watching this different requirements? The head of these constructions. The head of these constructions will be watching whether the craftsman is using the skill as per the requirement, or is she or he showing something which is outside this architecture principle. Which means I want the temple to be like this, so I want the sculptures to be present with this height, with this width, with this design. So everything will be decided by the head who is looking after construction of that architecture. They don't give free hands for these people to use their entire craft skill and high experience to construct the temple as they like. Sculptor will not construct temple as his wishes, rather he will sculpt in such a way that the architecture or the head of the architecture is saying. Which means whenever you are constructing something, we should not look for the best individual best. You may be very best in constructing many designs, but I want, for this temple I want this design. So in order to achieve the common objective, in order to achieve the ultimate objective, you have to compromise at one point with your craft, and you have to design your crafts in the requirement of this bigger institution. You have to compromise your craft skill for the so-called bigger institution. That is what I said. What does this mean? This means at times you have to exercise restraint on the craft skill of the person or the sculptor. Why you have to exercise restraint? If you are not exercising restraint with their creativity, they can create anything which is beautiful, but if that is not suiting to my requirement, to the requirement of the prototype, and then that becomes difficult. As a result, when you have a grand design in your head, when you have a grand design, when you have a grand design to construct the temple, use the sculptor's craft as per your requirements, not as per their wishes. Right? That is what architectonic principle says. Architectonic principle says one thing, that is called, whenever big architecture is being constructed, you will be restricting the so-called you'll be restricting the person's scraps to the bigger cause. You will be restricting the person's craft to the bigger cause. That is what architectonic principle says. So architectonic principle says one thing. My voice is breaking. Guys, can you check whether my voice is clear or not now?
Clear, sir.
Ramani, can you please check once from your end? Someone has typed me saying that your voice is not clear, sir. It's somewhat breaking. Can you please check? Now it's okay. Thank you. Now, architectonic means it is based on the principles of architecture. What is the principle of architecture? It is based on something called architectural qualities. What is this architectural qualities? In the architecture, you have clearly defined structure. You'll give a structure, and you, in order to attain this clear structure, you will be knowing what artist or which type of artistically elements should be sculpted. So the craftsman should be used to achieve this clear defined structures. So the idea of architectonic principle represents the elements of restraint and temperance. What is temperance? Holding on your nerves. That is called temperance. The elements of restraint and the elements of temperance represents architectonic principle. What do you mean by elements of restraint? As I said, in the larger interest, the head will be restraining the craftsman. That is, the authority of architecture, the head, will be restricting the craftsman's interest in the design as a whole. In the design as a whole. Similarly, when I say justice is an architectonic principle, justice is an architectonic principle means justice operates as a restraint upon man's particular capacity. Man will be having a lot of capacity, but don't let this capacity to allow. You have to restrain that capacity. Why you have to restrain that capacity? So that people will be doing their own work and they won't enter into others' work. Non-interference can be possible with this restriction. That is what Plato has believed about this justice. So justice operates as a restraint upon man's capability. Now there is one author called Michael Foster, F-O-S-T-E-R, Foster and Foster, Michael Foster. What Michael Foster said that in Plato, the relation of justice is with other elements. Justice, Plato has related justice with other elements, such as the virtues of architectonic. The virtues of architectonic. Now, Foster keeps this man's principle or justice of Plato in such a way that, look, Foster contains or described this architectonic principle with a carpenter. Think that there is a carpenter and he is assigned to make a door. To make a door. There is a carpenter and he is assigned to make a door. This carpenter might be having the highest degree of fitness to make the door. Highest degree of skill, highest degree of fitness to make the door. However, the carpenter will not be judged just based on the door, but he will be judged on the beauty of the building. He will be judged upon the beauty of the building. Unless the building attains beauty, your door will not have beauty. So he says that the door attains its beauty only when the building attains its beauty, which means which means which means The carpenter attains beauty not because of the sculpture. Sculpture is an one element of the entire building called this temple. So it is because of the entire architecture that the craftsman is being prized and not by looking at individual thing. If one sculpture is good, if the rest of the building is not nice, even that will vanish. That is called principle of architectonic principle. So Michael Foster keeps that very simply, saying that he relates Plato's justice to architectonic principle. I said again, what is architectonic principle? The authority of the architecture has to restrict the craftsman's skill in order to ensure the good of the building. In order for the welfare of the building, the authority of the architecture will be restraining. And he compares it with a good carpenter who is very good at making the building. However, the building will not, if the building is not good, the door will not have big relevance. So similarly, what he is saying is, similarly, justice means building. Justice means the temple. Individual persons may be having their own set of capacities, but their capacities vanish if the building is not nice, which means you can exercise restraints on your building, restraints on the capacities of individual, if it is not harming or if it is not helping the so-called the institution as a whole, the institution as a whole. For example, this can be used even in your case studies or somewhere in your ethics. Many times they ask that, think that think that there is an employee, think that there is an employee who is very good at skill set, he is very good at technical knowledge. There is an employee who is very good at technical knowledge and he knows how to do the works in a very consistent way, and he is working for an institution. Now think that he has very good technical knowledge, but on the ethical front, he is conducting sexual misconduct with the woman in the institution. He is behaving indecently with the woman in that institution. Despite of his craftsmanship, despite of his craftsmanship, as he is calming the institution, what role should institution take? Should take, as it is harming the institution, they should expel him or warn him. With just your technical knowledge, if you are keeping them with this attitude, then it spoils the beauty of the building, that is called institution. So this can be used. This is what he is saying. You might be having a lot of experience, but you might be having a great skill set, but that skill is going to be useless if you are not contributing to the good of the entire institution. That is what Plato is saying, or that is what architectonic principle is. So, in the good of the institution, you can restrict the craftsman's skills or you can restrict the craftsman's capabilities. Right. So, this is called architectonic principle, and justice, as per Plato, justice is an architectonic principle. So before going into that, let me quickly recap what we have discussed in the justice component. In the justice component, we have discussed about the idea of justice, the virtue of all the virtues. We started with Cephalus and Polemarchus. They gave conventional theory of justice. What do I mean by conventional theory of justice? Everyone has to fulfill their duty, everyone has to pay their dues. That is called duty. That is called conventional theory of justice. Polemarchus went a step ahead and have said that you you be just to your friends and unjust to your enemies. Right? It is no point of doing good to your enemies. But Socrates didn't agree. But this is called conventional theory of justice. They considered this is virtue justice. Thyrasimachus said a radical conception of justice, or he has propounded a radical conception of justice. In this radical conception, he said that whatever the might says, it is right and it is just. That is what he has said. But again, Socrates have opposed this. In order to support Thyrasimachus, you have Georgia and Protagoras. These two persons came in support of Thyrasimachus. Georgia gave skeptical nihilism. What do you mean by skeptical nihilism or nihilism? Irrespective of the so-called means, if the consequences are enriching your life skill, then go for that, right? Whether the money is coming from good or bad, that is illogical. Next, Protagoras says that man is measure of everything. Ultimately it is the man's or the individual's uh, best which is going to count. Again, this was not accepted by Socrates. Then comes Glaucon and Adimantus. What do they say? They have given one theory of justice called pragmatic theory of justice. Justice has an instrumental value but not intrinsic value. This is what they say. And then they have explained their concept with Geige's ring. What is this Geige's ring? If you are waging this ring, you will be invincible and then you can do whatever you like. So what they say is people respect law because of the fear of the authority, not because they want to respect as such. Hence, they say that justice, whatever we are speaking, is instrumental but not intrinsic. This is what they have propounded. The same theories will be used again in the concept of justice. But remember, don't forget this: conventional theory of justice, radical conception of justice, pragmatic theory of justice. And then you have one more theory that is called the Socrates theory and Plato's theory. What they say is justice is universal in nature, justice is transcendental in nature. In order to explain that, they explain that it is not the individual which is the measure of everything, rather it is state, because state is individual writ large. In order to prove their point, they go for city soul analogy. Based on this analogy, they wanted to prove that justice is in the interest of the higher state, not with the individual. And with this logic, they tries to prove universality of the justice and transcendentality of the justice. In their discussion, they comes across a state known as pig's state or fever state. What is a pig state or pig's state? It is an excitement state where people will be very happy because they will be having the resources and they will be having not only the resources but they will be having huge expansion of their territory. So then people will be very happy. That is called excitement state. And that, in order to attain that, what Plato says is you should have functional specialization of the people, where people will be stationed according to their requirements, according to their greatness, or according to their superiority of the soul. In that fixed state, in order to attain fixed state, what you have to do, you should not interfere into others' duties, right? And in that context itself, he has said justice is an architectonic principle. What do you mean by architectonic principle? Station the people properly, give functional specialization, don't allow people to interfere into other things. If you are not allowing that, that is called architectonic principle. Next, they say that Plato said justice is that virtue which converts virtues to excellence. He says there are four virtues. Already I have said what are the four virtues. That is called temperance, courage, reason. Temperance can be achieved through by the common man. That is called, this is the producing class. Courage is of the so-called guardian class, not guardian, protection class or guardian class. Reason is a ruling class. So these are the virtues, and he has said the fourth virtue is justice, and he said that justice is the virtue of all the virtues. Of all these virtues, justice is the ultimate virtue. Why he says justice is the ultimate virtue? Because It is only with justice that the other virtues reach excellence. Without justice, other virtues cannot reach excellence. Right? What is excellence? Excellence is mastering in the subject. Master the subject. Having highest skill set is excellence. Right? So that is what they say as far as Socrates and Plato is said. They have given architectonic principle. This is what conception of justice is as far as Plato and Socrates is considered. So in the same lines, Plato extends this to his theory of ideal state. To his theory of ideal state, he explains this. What is an ideal state? Ideal state as per Plato is, I already said, it is a just state, which means the state should be based on idea of justice. In that state, if you want to have idea of justice, what you have to do, you should have population functional specialization. Functional specialization. How? What do you mean by functional specialization? Station the people, station the people as per their superiority of the soul. As per their existing superiority of soul. So then only people will not interfere with others, and then they will live in harmony. Whenever they are living in harmony, slowly it leads to the so-called justice to be established, and that justice makes the state an ideal state. This is what he has said, and we have discussed so far. Now the question is it understood so far what I have said? Plato's theory of justice and what is it related to? Is there
Yes, sir.
anyone who has any question? A few people who have joined recently, if you want to understand this, what is this pixel state, what is this fever state, you have to look at my previous classes. It is something which is related to previous classes. Unless you understand that, I hope you'll not understand this. Right? So you need to understand that. So in short, let me quickly tell you, Plato is trying to establish the best state or ideal state. So what Plato says, in order to establish a best state and an ideal state, what you require is you require justice to be prevailing. In order to justice to prevail, you should have population, and that population should have functional specialization. Why? Unless and until people won't interfere into others' duties, excellence cannot come out. Hence, in order for the excellence to come out, people should do their own duty and should not interfere in others' duty. ఇన్ ఆర్డర్ టు నాట్ ఇంటర్ఫియర్, పక్కవారి దాంట్లో తల దూర్చకూడదు అంటే ఫస్ట్ ఏం చేయాలి? ప్రజలకి ఎవరి పని వారికి అప్పచెప్పాలి. ఎవరికి పని వారికి అప్పచెప్పే పద్ధతిని ఏమంటామంటే స్టేషనింగ్ ఆఫ్ ద పీపుల్ ఇన్ దేర్ రెస్పెక్టివ్ పొజిషన్స్ అంటాం. నీ పని ఇది, నీ పని ఇది అనేసి మొత్తం ప్రజల్ని మూడు రకాలుగా ఉంటారని చెప్పా, బేస్డ్ ఆన్ దేర్ సుపీరియారిటీ ఆఫ్ ద సోల్. వారి సోల్ని, వారి ఆత్మని బట్టి ప్రజల్ని మూడు రకాలుగా క్లాసిఫై చేస్తాము. ఒకరు వచ్చేసి హై సుపీరియర్ సోల్స్, చాలా మహాత్మ అంటాం కదా, మహాత్మ ఆత్మ దట్ కెన్ రిమెంబర్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఈజ్ నాన్ యాజ్ మహాత్మ. రైట్? అటువంటి ఆత్మలంతా రూలింగ్ క్లాస్కి ఇచ్చారు. నెక్స్ట్ వచ్చేసి చిన్న ఆత్మ ఉంటుంది, దానికంటే కొంచెం, దాన్ని ఏమంటారంటే చిన్నగా అంటే సైజులో కాదు, రిమెంబరెన్స్లో. ఓకే, అటువంటి సోల్స్ని ఏమంటారు? వారియర్ క్లాస్ అంటాము, ఆర్ గార్డియన్ క్లాస్ అంటాము. థర్డ్ వన్ వచ్చేసి అపెటైట్, ఆకలి ఉన్న ఆత్మ ఉంటుంది, ఎప్పుడు చూసినా తిండి నిద్ర ఇదే ఉంటాయి, ఆత్మలు ఉంటాయి కొన్ని. సో దట్ ఈస్ దట్ ఆత్మాస్ ఆర్ కాల్డ్ ప్రొడ్యూసింగ్ క్లాసెస్. Right? These things, sir, is any of the principles are relevant in the modern day democracies? Absolutely, they are. Almost all, everything is relevant. We'll discuss that. Let me complete this entire thing, then we'll understand how far Plato is relevant to the modern day democracies. Now, so they have said ఈ మూడు రకాలుగా డివిజన్ చేసిన తర్వాత what they said is, ఇలాంటి 3 టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ ప్రజలు ఉంటారు స్టేట్లో. ప్రజలను అర్థం చేసుకోవాలంటే ఫస్ట్ స్టేట్ని అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. ఎందుకంటే స్టేట్ ఈజ్ నథింగ్ బట్ అన్ ఎన్లార్జ్డ్ వర్షన్ ఆఫ్ పీపుల్ అనేసి అంటారు. కాబట్టి ఇండివిజువల్ స్టేట్ ఈజ్ అన్ ఇండివిజువల్ రిట్ లార్జ్ అనే కాన్సెప్ట్ని డిస్కస్ చేసాం. దాని నుంచి దీని కాన్సెప్ట్ని డిస్కస్ చేసి ఏం చెప్తున్నామంటే, నౌ ద డ్యూటీ ఆఫ్ ద జస్ట్ స్టేట్ ఈజ్, ఎవరి పని వారికి అప్పచెప్పడం. కీప్ ద పీపుల్ ఇన్ దేర్ రెస్పెక్టివ్ పొజిషన్స్, దట్ ఈస్ స్టేషన్ ద పీపుల్ యాజ్ పర్ దేర్ ఎగ్జిస్టింగ్ సుపీరియారిటీ ఆఫ్ ద సోల్. దీన్ని చేయాలి ఎవరు? సొసైటీలో ఎవరైతే రూల్ చేస్తున్నారో సొసైటీని ఈ విధంగా స్టేషన్ చేసుకుంటూ వెళ్ళాలి. స్టేషన్ చేసుకుంటే ఎవరి పని వారికి అప్పచెప్పడం. మరి ఈ పని అప్పచెప్పేటప్పుడు, ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు గివ్ దిస్ వర్క్, what it requires, you need to understand this thing called which human being has which soul. Which human being has which soul. You have to understand human soul. How you can understand the human soul now? Take for example, if there are 10 people, how can you station in that 10 people? How many people have appetite? How many people have courage? How many people have reason? Based on that you have to divide. Now how can you come to know that this particular section has appetite, this particular section has courage, this particular section has reason? In order to understand what is present in a human soul, you have to understand, or you can understand that through education. By educating the people, you will understand which soul they have. This makes us to enter into the next topic of Plato, that is called Plato's theory on education. Why he has propounded Plato's theory of education, or why Plato has propounded theory of education? ఇది విద్య ద్వారానే మనకి ఏ పర్సన్లో ఎటువంటి సోల్ ఉందో కనుక్కోగలము అనే ఒక ఉద్దేశంతో ఆయన థియరీ ఆఫ్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ అనే దాన్ని తీసుకుంటూ వచ్చారు. రైట్, దిస్ ఈస్ ద థింగ్. నౌ let me go to this. This makes us to enter into Plato's theory of education. What is the context of this discussion? The context of this discussion is, in order to station people in their respective positions, station people in their respective positions. What do you mean by stationing the people in their respective positions? Allot people their respective duty. Allot people their respective duty. What is the people's respective duty? Few people will be having the duty of producing. Few people will be having the duty of guarding. Few people will be having the duty of ruling. Right? Based on this, you have to station. Now, which people have this capability, which people have this capability, which people have this capability in your country? You should know that. In order to understand this, in order to station people and allot their respective duty, Plato has suggested to go for education, and he has propounded the theory of education. This is the pretext or context for saying the education. Education enduku cheppadu దీని కోసం చెప్పాడు. Right? Now, so this makes us to enter into Plato's theory of education. So he has derived this education. Now we will discuss about that education. So what is the greatness of Plato's theory of education? Let's try to understand that before going into the actual theory of education of Plato. What is the greatness that this education has? The greatness of Plato's education is, it is very exhaustive in its nature. This is very exhaustive in its nature. It encompasses everything. Exhaustive. What do I mean by exhaustive? It is very comprehensive in nature. He has covered all the forms of education here very comprehensively. He covered elementary education, he covered secondary education, He covered higher education. All the forms of education were covered by Plato. This is first thing, very exhaustive. Second thing is his theory of education is very theoretical and practical. It is theoretical and it is very practically applicable. It is theoretical and it is practicably applicable. Why theoretical and practical? He speaks about not just one type of education, but he speaks about development of mental capabilities of people, spiritual capabilities of people, physical aspect of people, all things. So they speak about Plato's theory of education speaks about personality development. Personality development like Mission Vijayata, right? Personality development of the individual. So this is the greatness of his theory of education. He spoke about his education exhaustively. He spoke about his education theoretically and practically, and he has not just confined to imparting the information, but he has confined or he has extended that beyond confining to information to the higher levels, which is known as personality development, which includes physical, mental, and spiritual education also. Till date, from the times of 330 BC or 350 BC, till date, Plato's theory on education is seen as one of the best works in the field of education. Even today, the Western societies are following this theory of education that he has propounded. So most of the Western education is based on the theory of education that this man has propounded way back some 2500 years ago. That is the greatness of this. Now, what is the source of influence for Plato? Source of influence for Plato to propound this theory. The source of influence is he has incorporated the good features of the education system that is existing in the good features of education system that is existing in the then Athens and Sparta. ఏథెన్స్ స్పార్టాలో అప్పుడు ఏదైతే గుడ్గా ఉన్నాయో ఎడ్యుకేషన్ సిస్టంలో ఆ క్వాలిటీస్ అన్నిటినీ తీసుకొని వచ్చి he has incorporated that in his own way of saying. There was one thinker called J.J. Rousseau, R-O-U-S-S-E-A-U. This person said that Plato's Republic is the best treatise in the field of education. Plato's Republic book. Plato's Republic is the best treatise on the field of or in the field of education. This is the greatest contribution that this person has done. Now he has looked at both the features of Athens and Sparta and he tried to incorporate that good features. Now what he has observed is, as he is belonging to Athens city, he observed some loopholes in the education system of Athens. Education system of Athens, he observed some loopholes. What is that loopholes that Athens education has compared to Sparta? The first thing is, in Athens, education was not state sponsored. It was in the hands of Sri Chaitanya and Narayana, that is private players. At that time, in Athens, education was still in the hands of private players. Whereas in Sparta, you have state sponsored education. As it is in the hands of the private players, education was dependent on the paying capacity of the parents. Paying capacity of the parents. If you are able to pay, or if your parents are able to pay, you can come to UPSC. So education was like that. Paying capacity of parents. But if you are unable to get paying capacity, or if your parents doesn't have capability of your payment, you have to see some jobs.